Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be getting started in just a minute or two. Thank you for joining us. We'll be getting started in just about 2 minutes. If you want to share in the chat where you are joining us from today, you are welcome to. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program, Cirque Science to Go Plant Defenses. My name is Joanna, and I'm a librarian with the Anne Arundel County Public Library, and I will be your host for the program today. We are so excited to host this program as part of the Maryland STEM Festival. The Maryland STEM Festival is an annual event that celebrates all things science, technology, engineering, and math each fall. This year's festival runs until November 14th, and you can find more events on their website at marylandstemfestival.org. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center for hosting and presenting this program with us today, and to the Women's History Initiative for sponsoring this event. To access the closed captions, you'll need to click the closed captions button at the bottom of your screen. You can also listen to this event in Spanish by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. If you would like Spanish language captions, you can use the link that is being added to the chat. And during today's program, we will have some time at the end to answer your questions. Please feel free to share anything you would like to ask our presenters and scientists in the chat or Q&A. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter for the program today, Emily Borger. Emily, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, or CERC, as I'm going to call it. My name is Emily Borger, and I am the STEM Program Assistant. Now, here at CERC, we have over 20 different research laboratories that work here on the Chesapeake Bay and all over the world. Our researchers study trees, orchids, shark migration, ocean acidification, marshes, and so much more. In fact, I am so excited to bring you some really cool science about one of our research subjects here at CERC, plant defenses. As well as we're going to be able to meet one of our scientists who does that research. Now, today we're going to focus on one particular question: how can plants defend themselves? Now, let's get in the chat. What do you think plant defenses mean, or defenses in general? Yeah, I see some people say thorns could be a plant defense. We're definitely going to talk about a lot of physical protection that some plants do. Ooh, some bad smells, poison, that's awesome. So those are some of the more chemical defenses we do. I see Laura said defenses is trying not to get eaten. That's pretty much in general what we do as a defense. We don't want to get eaten, especially plants. Now, we are going to work together and do an experiment, and we're going to do it together here, but I would absolutely love to see what you're doing at home. So if you want, feel free to take as many pictures as we go along and post it on social media with our hashtag Science2Go. Once again, that's hashtag Science2Go. You can post this on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And we're going to love to see what you do with all these experiments. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on our document cam and kind of show you what our supplies are for today's experiments. Awesome. Now we have a whole bunch of supplies here, and what we're going to do is we would like to kind of go over what we have just to make sure that everyone has what they need. The first thing we're going to do is we have 3 cups, and I want you to set those aside because we're going to set those up in just a little bit. The next thing we have is we have 3 teas. We have our mint tea, our black tea, and our lemon tea. We also have index cards for nice labeling. They should be 3 of them. Some bamboo tongs, a pom-pom, a stir rod for stirring the tea, 5 toothpicks, and some fun little water testing strips. Now, be very careful with these testing strips. You notice that there are some raised squares on them. We don't want to touch them throughout the experiment. Now, let's set up the first part of our experiment. I know a lot of people mentioned that some plants taste bad or smell bad or they have poison, and those are a type of chemical defense. And that's what the first experiment we're going to work on. Now, we have those 3 cups, and I want you to fill them about halfway with water. It doesn't matter what temperature. We're going to let these sit for a little bit. I recommend doing lukewarm. We don't want to accidentally burn anyone. Or if you're like me and you have a lot of electronics around, be very careful, and we don't want to have that hot water. So after you have each of those 3 cups halfway full of water, we're going to take one of our tea bags. I have my black tea bag here, and we're going to open it up and stick it in there to steep. And you notice that Lexi, who is doing the experiment today, thank you, Lexi, she has an index card directly underneath. And we want to label our teas just to make sure we know what's going to happen. So for this one, we're going to label it black. And we're going to do this for all 3 of our teas. So the next tea we want to work on is our lemon tea. Now, if you have any sensitivities for lemon or anything like that, I recommend having someone else do this. And this says lemon, but just as a reminder, this is actually lemon hibiscus. So it actually might not be the color you expect. So if your color turns red, it's because this has hibiscus in it, but it shouldn't affect the experiment too much. Now, finally, we have our mint tea. So again, if you have a sensitivity towards mint, then be very careful using this, but we're going to stick it into our 3rd cup. And if I could have a little bit of notification if people are good or if I need to slow down, because getting water might take a little bit of time. So we're going to wait just a little bit. And while we wait for everyone to make sure that their tea is ready to steep, let's talk a little bit about plant defenses. Now, as we mentioned before, that we have both physical and chemical defenses. Now, if you're going to think about physical defenses, it's like a suit of armor or a sword or something like that that just protects the plant physically. Now, with chemical defenses, as other people have mentioned in the chat, those could be things that make the predators or something that wants to eat the plant not really want to eat them. So either be really stinky or be really sticky or have this really gross taste to it to make the predator not want to deal with it ever again. Now, I see a lot of people saying they're good with the teas. So let's go ahead and set this tea aside. And we are going to talk about today's scientist. Now, we have a really awesome video to introduce her. So let's go ahead and start that up.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. My name is Kim Komatsu, and I am the lead scientist of the Ecosystem Conservation Lab here at SERC. So I am a global change ecologist, and what that means is that I study the effects of humans, so things like human activities like land use change or nutrient pollution or climate change. What are all of those different human-caused factors doing to our environment? So in our lab, we study forested ecosystems like the one we're here in at SERC. We also study agricultural systems like grasslands across the North American Great Plains, as well as soybean fields here in Maryland to see how we can produce more sustainable systems under these global change factors. So this is really important research that we're doing in the lab to try and understand how these systems are going to be changing in the future and what we as humans can do to try and mitigate or protect our systems from human causes in the future as well. So right now we're standing in a forest plot here at SERC that's our oldest forest that we have. So it's about 286 years old since it was converted from agriculture. And we have a whole range of forest ages across the property that we have here at SERC, ranging from this really, really old stand all the way up to young stands that are 1 or 2 years since conversion from agriculture. So today we're out here in the forest at SERC to collect some leaves from trees to see how much insects are eating those leaves. And so we're looking at 3 different species of trees: tulip poplar, sweet gum, and beech. And we're comparing different ages of these species of trees to see are insects eating the seedlings, the little baby trees, more than they're eating the big adult trees, or what about the trees that are in between in age, the saplings? And so for this project, we're really thinking about what the natural insect communities are in these forests. So in every ecosystem, insects are a natural part of the community. So if you didn't have any insects interacting with the plants, that would be considered an unhealthy ecosystem. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you had an outbreak of insects, or potentially a non-native insect that's coming in and killing lots of trees, then that would also be considered an unhealthy ecosystem. And so we're trying to determine what is the natural balance between insects that are eating the trees versus the abundances of these trees in this forest system. So what we're doing out here today is collecting leaves using a pole pruner to get way up high leaves from the canopy, as well as taking pictures of leaves of our seedlings down on the ground. And then we'll take our leaf samples back to the lab and take a look at the kinds of damage that we're seeing.
Emily, you're muted. Yep. Awesome. That is such a cool video. And I would like to introduce you to Dr. Kim. Hi, Kim. How are you today?
Great. It's very nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh my goodness. I am so happy to see you and learn all about plant defenses. Now, quick question. Could you remind me, what are you doing here at SERC? I know we saw a lot of really cool videos.
Yeah, so like we said in the beginning, we have lots of different research labs here at SERC. So I am one of the lead scientists among 20 other or so people here who are running labs at SERC. And we're all supervising teams of scientists that are trying to understand what's happening in the world around us. And so we really want to ask questions about this world and also how humans are impacting the world around us. So what are we doing that could be harmful? What practices can we use that could potentially protect the important ecosystems that we rely on, not only for their intrinsic natural value of the environment, but also because humans do rely on the services that the environment provides to us as well. So yeah, in general, my career is as a scientist. I love my job. And then I guess in my free time, I'm not a scientist when I go home, right? So I also make pottery. I play lots of board games. I love to read. So just a reminder that scientists, we're people also just like everybody else, and have lots of other hobbies too.
Awesome. What is the favorite piece of pottery you've ever made, if I may ask?
That's a good question. Yeah, I make a lot of things that collapse or fall apart, but I like to make bowls and plates, and I like to decorate them with environmental themes. So I made one recently that has a nice heron on it and a marsh around it and the water. So I think that's my favorite for now.
Oh, that's really cool. And I know you said you're not a scientist at home, but it's still fun to see how you bring your interests into your hobbies. I know I like to crochet a lot of natural things. It's one of my hobbies. That's amazing. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk a little bit about physical defenses. Now, Kim, what kind of physical defenses do you see out in the field when you work on with your forest and your leaves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think people in the chat mentioned a lot of really good ones. So things that we see, but also feel ourselves as mammals are things like thorns and spines. These are pokey things that can prevent animals like deer or rabbits from eating plants. But lots of plants also are trying to protect themselves against insects. And so they might be really furry or hairy. Things that feel soft and fuzzy to us, to an insect, is really difficult to eat through because the hairs get into their mouth and they can't really chew down or bite down on the leaves that are out there. So there's a range of different physical defenses that you could see.
Yeah, and that's really cool because for us, since we're so big, those hairs might not bother us as much. But if you're an insect and you've got tiny little jaws, that is going to make a big difference. Now, speaking of insects, I think what we're going to do is we're going to move over to our next experiment where we're going to imitate those tiny little jaws of a grasshopper. And Kim, if you want to join us and do it along with us, feel free. I would love to have you help us out. So let's go ahead and swap to that document camera. And for this experiment, you're going to need a pom-pom, these bamboo tongs, which are going to be our grasshopper jaws, and your 5 toothpicks. And this experiment is a little bit of playing pretend, a little bit of modeling. We're going to pretend that this pom-pom is a seed. And if you were an insect and this seed is on the ground or on a bush or on a tree, any kind of plant like that, and you come along, I want you to go ahead and pick that up and eat it. So do you think that was difficult or easy? It might be difficult for some people. We're not used to the tongs, but if you were a grasshopper, it's pretty easy to pick up just like so. Now, let's add some physical defenses to our seed. We can take our toothpicks and we're going to stick them all the way through and try to stick as many as you can. And these toothpicks are a little bit fragile and sometimes they're a little bit pokey, but be very careful because we don't want to accidentally poke anyone. In fact, mine just broke, so I'm going to have one less toothpick in my seed today. And I just want to compliment Lexi because she's doing an amazing job of adding our thorns and pokey things to our seed. Now let me know when everyone is ready for the next step. And I'll have the chat running as well. Okay, I see some people are ready. And if you are, I know I'm having trouble with my last toothpick, so I'm just going to let mine aside. But if you're having trouble, don't worry about it. We'll just work on this as we continue. Now, let's take our grasshopper jaws again and try to bite into that seed. Now you notice it's a little bit more difficult, especially if, even though they're just tongs, especially if you have a mouth around it and you're trying to swallow that seed. It's a little bit more difficult, and that's what plants do to adapt or change to protect themselves from predators. Now, Lexi has absolutely amazing uber seed because as plants adapt, other animals might adapt too to try to eat it more. So it's kind of a race to see who has the better defenses or the better way to eat. Now, this seed must have had a really hard generation, and generations add more and more and more seeds. To continue to pretend, if you were a grasshopper, which seed would you rather eat? Which one do you think would be the easiest to eat? I hear someone say the smallest one. Yeah, because it doesn't have those nasty thorns or spikes or things. Unfortunately, if you were a plant, which one would you rather have? Yeah, the orange one, the one with the most spikes. Now, Kim, why don't all seeds have spikes like this if it's so good at defending themselves?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. And you can think of these defenses as adaptations. So the plants through time might be slowly evolving to build these defenses against the herbivores that are trying to eat them. Potentially within one individual, if it's a long-lived plant, it could not have defenses early in its life, but then be exposed to herbivores and realize, oh no, I'm being eaten and I need to do something about this. And so it might start to express these defenses throughout its life. But there are often species also that take a totally different strategy. And instead of having plant defenses, which can be costly to make, it takes a lot of energy for a plant to make thorns or hairs or spines or chemicals. Instead of that, they could just put all of that energy into producing seeds. They could grow really fast and try and escape herbivores by just producing as many offspring as possible. And it's unfortunate that some of them are eaten, but they have many more that they can spare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, the predators also need to eat. So it's very important for everyone to be able to survive for our environment to work out. Okay, thank you very much, Lexi, and thank you, Kim, for your answers. What we're going to do now is let's get a little bit into your research, Kim. I would love to hear more about it. So what is some of the insects that we have here in the forests in Cirque?
We have so many insects here at Cirque, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I've printed out some pictures here to show of some of the examples of types of insects we have, because I'm just so excited about it. So we have lots of things like butterflies and moths, things that we think of as pollinators when they're adults, but when they are larvae, they are caterpillars. So this is an example of a woolly bear caterpillar. These are really common here at Cirque. If you come hike our trails, you'll see them in the fall walking back and forth across the road. And they as caterpillars eat plants. So they start out as herbivores and then they turn into pollinators, which is really cool. We also have lots of things like this fly here. This is a deer fly, but also bees and wasps, little things that fly around as adults. Again, as larvae, when they're young, they are herbivores. So they are similar to caterpillars that are eating our plants. And then we have lots and lots of beetles here. This is one of my favorite examples also. It's a tiger beetle. They're really shiny. They look like little jewels and they run super fast like a tiger does. So we have lots and lots of these specific beetles at Cirque, but we actually have a volunteer here at Cirque who's been looking at beetle diversity in our forest. And he has found over 700 different species of beetles just here at the forests at Cirque. So we have so many different kinds of insects here, and the poor plants that are in our forests really have to be thinking about, in as much as a plant can think, they're thinking about how can they defend themselves against all of these different kinds of insects that are trying to eat them.
Oh man, that is so interesting. I have seen so many of those little fuzzy worms here, especially in the fall, working here at Cirque. Now, are those insects eating the trees here? I know you mentioned that the plants have to work really hard to make sure that they're safe. So do we have any particular issues with a lot of insects eating a tree too much?
Yeah, so here at CERC, we're really trying to understand the balance between the plants and the insects. So insects are a natural part of our environment. And as you said, they need something to eat. So we don't often see big outbreaks of insects that are trying to eat our plants, but we do see lots of different kinds of plant damage in our trees. And so I have some examples of leaves here that I'm going to show you today. Let me share my screen really quick so you can see some of the different kinds of damage that we see on our plants. So some of our herbivores here are leaf chewing herbivores. So they kind of just eat around the margins of leaves here. And you can tell leaf chewers because they have these irregular edges to the damage that they do to our leaves. These are all beech leaves that I'm showing you today. So things like caterpillars do this. It's like an example would be you eating a piece of lettuce, right? Where you're just ripping apart the leaf. You're leaving these jagged, irregular edges as your type of damage. But we also see lots of other kinds of herbivores. So I'll show you another example here. We have some leaf skeletonizers. So these are super cool insects. They eat around, they just eat the fleshy part of the leaf. So they eat around the veins. And so they leave behind these beautiful lacy patterns in the leaves. So these are things like beetles and some fly larvae will do this. And we don't see an herbivore on this leaf, but we do see evidence of the herbivore that used to be here. This is frass or insect poop. So this is what was left behind when our insect left our leaf after it did all of this damage. And then we also have insects, if I just flip this leaf over, we have some insects that have mouth parts that are kind of like straws. So these are things like tree hoppers or the cicadas that were out this past spring. And so we see evidence of their damage on the leaves by these little pinpoint holes in the leaves. We call it stippling damage. And so these are those insects tapping into the leaf with their straw-like mouth parts and just sucking out the juices from inside. And then the last example I'll show you here are galls. And so they kind of look like mold or fungal damage, but really what we're looking at is another kind of insect. In this case, it's well, not an insect, it's an arthropod, a mite. So very similar to an insect that is injecting chemicals into the leaf. And so it causes the leaf to make these little spots. These are parts of the leaf that have been expanded out to provide a home for the mites to live in. And so it's not a fungal damage or it's not some sort of other disease or pathogen. Really what's happening is this insect is tricking the plant into creating a home for it to live in. So there's all kinds of ways that we could look at the different damage that we're seeing by the insects on the leaves here at CERC. And from that, we could say something about who the insects are in the community that we're looking at here.
Oh, that's so cool. And I can't imagine, I keep looking, I just walk past leaves and see all those different things. And I never really think about what causes it. Now, we've seen a lot of insects here, but what about ways that plants have adapted to defend themselves against each of those types of damage?
Yeah, so thinking about the herbivores that are have more chewing mouth parts, like your example with the grasshopper and our pom-pom, we have lots of defenses like thorns and spines or hairs on leaves that are protecting the leaves against those chewers. But as we'll see with our tea experiment that we're about to go back to here, there's also lots of chemical defenses. So plants can be producing chemicals that taste bad. I have an example here of a milkweed plant that when you pull off the leaves, the plant has milky sap. Let's see if I can get a good example here. This is a plant that's dying from the beginning of the summer, so we might not have as much milk. But you can see examples of these milkweeds in many people's yards. Monarch butterflies like to eat them. So oftentimes insects have adapted or evolved to be able to overcome the defenses that the plants have. But having milky sap, sticky sap can be another way to protect yourself against insects as well. So plants are pretty smart. They're coming up with lots of ways to overcome the insects that are trying to eat them.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, we had a plumeria plant in our backyard, and that also produced a lot of milky sap. So I learned not to pull any leaves off the trees, which means the defenses worked, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, they can be so sticky. It gets all over your hands and it's very uncomfortable. No. Imagine if you were just a tiny insect dealing with that.
Speaking of insects, are insects bad? Do they hurt the trees that you study?
Yeah, so I think this is a common perception, especially as humans when we live in houses, and many of the insects we might encounter on a day-to-day basis are pests. You don't want insects like cockroaches or flies in your house eating your food. But out in the natural world, insects are really part of a healthy ecosystem. So they're really important to have. They keep a balance between the plants that are growing as well as the animals like birds that rely on insects to eat themselves. And so if we didn't have insects, if they all disappeared, we would be in big trouble in our ecosystems because we would lose that important food source and the control on the plant species that they're eating as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of insects, what is happening with insect populations around the world if they're so important?
Yeah, I think this is a really critical question that we are trying to address right now as scientists. So there's some evidence that are coming out from different places around the world that shows that insects are declining in their populations. So we're seeing fewer and fewer numbers of insects all around the world. This is something that we don't quite understand yet why that's happening. So there's a lot of different hypotheses, potentially pesticide use in agricultural fields or in people's yards in the suburban areas could be a big player. We think potentially climate change could be a problem. So as we're seeing changing weather patterns, the insects might not be able to deal with that. They might be emerging too early and they don't have the plants that they like to eat. They might be emerging too late and they're not able to reproduce before the end of the growing season. So there's lots of potential problems that insects are facing. And so because of that, we're seeing these big declines and we're still trying to do research and understand more why that's happening.
Yeah, it's something so small that you don't think about. It would be so important. And even the decline it's not great. What can I do to help with all of that?
Yeah, there's lots of things that you could do in your own homes. So you could, first of all, try and purchase food that you know has been grown without pesticides. Lots of agricultural growers are applying way too much pesticides, more than they need to be able to control insect populations in their crops. So organic foods, although they're more expensive, they tend to be better for the insect populations. We can also be doing things in our own yards, like not applying insecticides in our yards. So for example, lots of people in the area spray for mosquitoes, which is understandable because mosquitoes are an insect that I myself don't like very much either. But all of those companies that are spraying for mosquitoes are using a chemical that's really bad for lots of other kinds of insects as well. And so when we're killing the mosquitoes, we're also killing all of these other insects that are really beneficial for the environment. So using bug spray that you might just spray on your own body or potentially using mosquito traps that are very specific to just mosquitoes is a better way to go. And then the last thing I would say is thinking about how you landscape your yard. Raking up all your leaves in the fall and throwing them all away is taking away habitat that lots of insects really depend on to survive over the winter. And so if you're able to rake your leaves into a pile and use it as mulch in your own yard around the trees, potentially, that gives those insects a habitat that they could all live in still.
Yeah, and even having leaving the piles of leaves somewhere else is a little bit less work for me in the fall too. So it helps both.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all your talk about plant defenses and insects. If you want to keep on with us, we're going to move back and continue our tea experiment to talk more about chemical defenses.
I'm excited to see what you find.
Awesome. Okay, let's pull up that document camera. Thank you so much, Lexi. And now we have our tea and hopefully they've steeped enough. So let's see our black tea. That'll probably be the darkest one. Ooh, that looks really good. Okay, before we do anything, let's go ahead and take those bags out so we're not going to be bothered with the strings anywhere. I recommend putting them on a plate or on a paper towel. Just again, we don't want the electricity to get zapped anyone today. Now, we're not here going to taste it, but if you want to smell each of the teas and taste it just to kind of see what difference happened while we put the tea bags in and why did the color change? So why do you think the color changed so much in this tea? And why do you think it smells interesting? Well, if you could remember what you did for the experiment, that could help too. Yeah. So these chemicals in the tea actually come from plants. So just like we were talking about with plants having chemical and species, yeah, like the herbs in the tea. And this is a chemical defense, actually. For instance, lemon is our next tea that we're going to look at, and mint. The lemon and the mint are chemical defenses to prevent predators from eating it, but we have actually developed them to taste really good. Now, what kind of examples of chemical defenses can you think of that the plants may have designed to keep away predators, but humans have kind of developed that they really, really like it? I know for me, I really, really like hot sauce. I will put it on basically everything, and spicy is a chemical defense. Yeah, if you have an answer, just go ahead and put it in the chat so I can see. Ooh, cinnamon. Cinnamon is very aromatic. Onions is a good one. One things I can think of is spinach, actually. If you've ever cooked spinach on its own, it's very bitter, and that's actually the chemical defense. Caffeine. Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, I don't drink coffee all the time, but definitely caffeine is something like that. Okay, hopefully everyone has had their tea bags out and kind of smelled and tasted. What we're going to do next is we are going to carefully pull out our test strips. Now, just as a reminder, we want to be extra careful to not touch the raised squares. And looking at the raised squares, there are 5 of them. When you look at, we're going to focus on the one in the middle. And the one in the middle actually measures the acidity of the water, or the pH. Now, the darker the square will be, the higher the pH, I believe. And the lighter the square will be, I believe it would be the less pH. Now, the less pH it is, the more acidic it is. Now, what kind of examples of an acidic thing can you think of in the chat? Kim, can you think of something really acidic? Ooh, lemon is a good one.
Yeah, all kinds of citrus is very acidic. That's a great example.
Yeah. So we would kind of assume that one of our teas might be more acidic than others. Ooh, vinegar. Yeah. And moving on to the higher pH, which is more basic and less acidic, we have more extreme. We have our bleach and ammonia and things like that. Oh, battery fluid. Battery fluid is extreme in the opposite direction with acidic. Okay, now we've got our squares and we have our tea. What we're going to do now is we're going to test the pH, or the acidity, of each of our liquids. So we're going to take it in, making sure to hold on the long end, and we're going to stir it around, give it, 5 or 6 stirs, a nice good amount. And once we have that stir done, we're going to lay it nicely on our labeled index card so we know exactly where it is. And we're going to do those for all 3 of them. And this takes just a little bit to process. So we're going to put all 3 of those aside and look at that lemon tea. You know how I mentioned earlier that it's actually lemon hibiscus? So the lemon and hibiscus, and I think there's rose hips in the tea as well, did change the color, but it shouldn't change the acidity too much, hopefully. Now, while we're doing this, we are scientists here, we're doing an experiment, and as Lexi does the mint tea, let's do a little bit of a hypothesis. Which tea do you think will be the most acidic? Which one do you think will have the lowest pH? You want to put it in the chat. Mint and lemon is a good. Black tea, mint. We're seeing a lot of different hypotheses, and that's fine because a hypothesis is where scientists make guesses, and then we get the information first, and then we kind of do that, see which one's right. Awesome. Now this is going to take a little bit. So if we want, we can kind of wait and put that aside just for a little bit. And if Kim, if you want to talk a little bit more about certain chemical defenses that you have encountered, or if people in the chat want to talk about different plant chemical defenses or chemical defenses that you like to eat. And we're going to wait for those squares to change color.
Yeah, I would add in that chemical defenses, I think, are really cool because there's something that a plant can do very quickly, right? So when you think about physical defenses like spines or thorns or hairs, it takes a long time for the plant to grow them. They can't instantly respond to an herbivore that's coming by. But with chemical defenses, plants can often create those chemicals in their tissue relatively quickly.
Oh, wow.
And what's super cool is that there's some plants that we have evidence they can talk to each other through chemicals. And so one plant might be eaten by an herbivore. It produces its own chemical defenses in its own plant tissues, like its leaves, but it's also releasing hormones or chemicals into the environment to warn the other plants around it that it's been eaten. The herbivore might be coming towards these other plants. And so the other plants have been shown to, even when they don't have an herbivore on them, they turn on those chemical defenses because they're listening to what this plant that was eaten is saying.
Oh, wow. That's super cool. It's this interweb of communication. The day I learned that plants can talk to each other through chemicals was a very good day. That's something you don't think about that often.
Yeah, totally. We often think of plants as they're sitting there, they're defenseless, but that's really not the case. They have so many different ways that they can try and defend themselves.
And I know it hasn't been the full 5 minutes. So if you already are waiting for your squares to change color, keep them over there. But we have Lexi, if she could turn the document camera on back. We do have some that we prepared in advance to make sure the color was extra bright for everyone. So let's go ahead and pull those up and see what kind of results we saw. So here's our black tea. We also have our lemon tea. And our mint. Oh, that's very interesting. So if you look at that middle square, one of them is a lot darker than the other. Yeah, so that would mean, I believe that would mean that it's the most acidic, I think, if I can remember the strips correctly. That's very interesting. And your results might be different than ours because the differences in the water, the differences in the time you put it in, how much you steep the liquid can all change these different things. So remember what I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to see all of your different experiments. So if you want to take a picture of those last strips, feel free to put it in our hashtag Science2Go and any social media site you can. And I would love to see your results. Yeah. So did your test strips support your hypothesis? Awesome. Now I have a question for all of you. If you were a predator or an insect or any kind of animal you might, Yeah, so Lenora had a different result than we did. Which one would you want to avoid the most? Which plant do you think would be that you wouldn't want to deal with very much? And you would probably go for a different plant. Yeah, if I was our hypothetical grasshopper from before, I would probably want to avoid the mint because I don't want that acidic taste. What about you, Kim?
Yeah, I personally don't like the taste of mint. And so that's the one that I would avoid, but I love lemon. So sometimes we can cue in on things that the plants are using as defenses. Like you said, that you love hot sauce and I love citrus. So I think our taste buds are a little different than the insects.
Yeah, and that works really well too, because if all the insects like the same thing, then we wouldn't have much of that plant and it kind of evens out. Okay, we have a lot of answers. Thank you very much, everyone who joined. And thank you, Kim, for coming. We have a little bit more time to focus on some possible questions that we've gotten throughout the chat. So let me cue them up. On our
I can
first
help with that too.
awesome.
So we've got quite a few questions from our participants today. And if you have questions, please feel free to keep sharing them. We'll answer the ones that we have some time for. Let's see. I think the first one that I want to ask you guys is somebody asked, they heard the spiders are really important for the environment. Is that true?
Definitely, that's true. Yes, this is a great question because we often, as humans, have been conditioned to be afraid of spiders. And sometimes that's a good thing because some spiders are poisonous, but most spiders are not harmful to humans. And they're actually really beneficial because they're eating the bugs that are out in the environment. So they're keeping the bug populations under control. If you didn't have spiders or other predators of insects, then you would be seeing increases in abundances of those insects that could be bad, not only for humans, but also for the plants that are around us. And in addition, spiders are a really important food source. So things like birds or reptiles and amphibians are eating spiders. And so if we lost them from the environment, those animals also wouldn't have a food source. So overall, spiders are really critical for a healthy ecosystem.
Awesome. And Joanna, before you start the next question, I have a quick correction about my experiment. Now, this is what scientists do. Sometimes we make mistakes and we need to fix them as quickly as possible. I made a mistake with the acidic strips. The darker color is the least acidic. So if you had those, if you were kind of confused about the results, that was my fault. The lighter color was the most acidic. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to add that in.
All right, next question. Someone asked, can you touch the caterpillar that has the little spikes? I've always thought they were poisonous.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so you can touch them. They can be really irritating for human skin. And so I tend not to touch them. And I think this is a really great example of another kind of defense, right? So the plants that we're talking about might have spines and thorns and hairs. These caterpillars are hairy and they have some irritating chemicals in those hairs to try and avoid being eaten as well. So they're trying to avoid being eaten by the birds that are out there, or probably they're trying to avoid being picked up by us. So yeah, I avoid them myself, but it's not so toxic that you would you have to be sent to the hospital or, have any major injuries.
All right. Somebody else wanted to know, how would our bodies not react to the pH from any plant pH? So I think they're wondering why we're able to eat things like mint and lemon, but the bugs really don't like it and it can hurt them.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. And as a doctor of philosophy and not a doctor of medicine, it's hard for me to answer the human side, but my guess would be that we are so much bigger, first of all. And so when you think about an insect that's so tiny, if it's eating a very concentrated chemical in a leaf, and that's its main diet, that could be harmful to the insect. And it might not even be harmful to the point of being deadly, but it could just be something that doesn't taste good. And there's, of course, lots of plants or other foods that we eat that we personally don't think taste good as well. So it's I think it's a matter of scale, how much bigger we are, and how varied our diet is compared to some of these insects.
So another kind of similar question. Somebody wanted to know, why does poison ivy or poison oak make you itchy?
Yeah, so these plants have chemicals in them as well that are mostly geared towards mammals that are trying to prevent us from touching them. Or if you think about something like a cow or a deer out in the forest, trying to prevent them from eating it as well. So these are chemicals in the plants. Some of them even get into the air that warn us not to touch and to stay away.
All right. Somebody else was wondering, are stink bugs good for the environment?
Yeah, definitely. I think stink bugs are another example of an insect that we might not want in our houses, and they often try and come inside when it's getting cold out. They can be smelly, but they are definitely important for the environment in the right balance. So again, everything comes back to balance, right? If you had no insects or any of these insects died out, that would be a bad thing because they are keeping the plant populations in check, and they are serving as food sources to other animals. But on the other side, if you have an outbreak, so examples of these are some non-native species that are coming across our area here. An example is the emerald ash borer. This is an insect species that's killing all of our ash trees. So these are outbreaks that are really bad for the environment. So really, either way, if you have too few insects or if you have too many insects, that is not a healthy ecosystem.
So it sounds like it's good to have things like spiders and stink bugs, but we want to make sure we don't have so many that the plants don't get a chance to live too.
Yes, exactly.
All right, next question. So I think this is kind of related to what we were talking about. Somebody wanted to know, wouldn't the plant die if an insect is living or ripping it apart? So if they're living on it or ripping it apart, how do the plants survive?
Yeah, so I think this again goes back to the scale of the insects. So this is one of the questions we're trying to address with the work we're doing here is, does it matter how big the plant is or how old the plant is, whether or not it is killed by these insects? And so we're looking at the little baby plants, the seedlings in the forest understory, and we're looking at the really big adult plants that might be 100 years old in the canopy, and saying how much insect damage does it take to kill a plant? And potentially, how are these plants surviving even though they're being eaten?
All right, and this is so great because I feel like the questions are really connected. The next one is, how do plants evolve?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so evolution is something that applies to plants, but it also applies to all organisms in the environment. So they are slowly changing over time by a variety of different processes. One of the ones that's really important is the individuals that don't have the right defenses against these insects, for example, are the ones that aren't going to make it to reproduce in that generation. And so potentially a plant that has more defended leaves or more defended stems could be avoiding being eaten. And because of that, it has more resources to reproduce. And because of that, its offspring are going to have those genes that also are producing lots of spines or thorns or chemicals. And so it's really a slow evolution through time as these plants are adapting and changing from one generation to the next, that they might have, by chance, an individual that has more spines, the genes for creating more spines would reproduce more, and then its offspring would also have more spines. But as Emily said before, it's an arms race between the insects and the plants. So as the plants are slowly evolving to be more defended, the insects are also slowly evolving ways to be able to eat those plants too. So we have really cool, interesting symbioses where there's very specific insect herbivores that eat very specific plants because they're the only ones that have learned or evolved over time to overcome those defenses.
All right, so someone else was wondering, are there any plant defenses that also irritate humans?
Definitely, all kinds. So thinking about things like Emily mentioned hot sauce before. If you're cutting up a pepper, And you might have had this problem, some of the adults that are watching, if you're not careful with your fingers, when you're cutting up a pepper and peeling out the seeds, you can have hands that are burning for hours after you've cut your jalapeno pepper or your habanero pepper up. There was someone that gave a great example of onions in the chat. Onions making you cry. That's a plant defense that's trying to protect against being eaten, but it's also causing us pain. And like I said, something that I experience in the forests here at CERC when I'm trying to climb through the brush to study our trees are all the thorns and spines on all the different plants here. They're catching me up as well as preventing herbivores from trying to eat them.
All right, I think we have time for maybe about 2 or 3 more questions. So the next one is, if the insects eat the skin of the plant and leave the veins, would the plant go back? And how would it grow back?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And really, the way that plants are growing back tends to be putting out new leaves. So often once a plant has grown a leaf, the leaf can expand in size, but it can't replace that tissue that's been eaten away. And so you can maybe find examples of this in your own backyard where you'll see a leaf that had a very tiny hole at the beginning. As it grows older throughout the summer, you'll see that hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that might not be because a new insect is coming to eat it. It might just be because the plant is expanding. And so that existing hole is already expanding. So they can't replace the tissue that was lost. Often they just grow new leaves to try and compensate for it.
Cool. All right. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So my next question for you is, what type of defense do sea plants have? Do you have any ideas or examples?
Sorry, did you say sea, like the ocean?
Yeah, like plants that live in the ocean or live in the water.
That is a really good question for some of our other colleagues here at CERC that study marine environments. I would guess that those plants definitely have adaptations that help protect them against the herbivores that are eating them in the water as well. I don't know of any specific examples, but I do think that a lot of the aquatic plants are also using the strategy of, instead of defending themselves, they just try and grow really fast. And they have often the advantage when you think about things like algae, they can move around in the ocean. So they don't have roots that are locking them in place. So they can try and escape in that way as well.
All right. This has all been so cool. And I think my last question for you is actually one for me. So we've been talking so much about different kinds of plant defenses. Do you have a favorite one or one that you think is really, really cool?
Yeah, my favorite plant defense is one that we haven't talked about yet today. So I'm glad you asked. So some plants, instead of making physical defenses or chemical defenses, they actually do move to avoid being eaten. So one of my favorite plants is the sensitive partridge pea, which many people might have seen around the area, that if you touch the leaves, they close up. So that if you think about an insect that's trying to walk along the leaf, if the leaf closes up, it causes the insect to fall off and it doesn't give as much surface for the insect to be able to attack. So I think we think about plants as really stationary things, but often they are moving and reacting in ways that we don't anticipate.
That is so awesome. I had no idea. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you all so much. So thank you, Emily, for hosting, and Kim for sharing your amazing knowledge with us. And thank you to all of the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center for making all of this possible and for such an amazing program. Also, thank you to our participants who are able to attend. Please feel free to check back at the Anne Arundel County Public Library website for more events for all ages, both virtual and in person. And I'm going to share the link for that in the chat. And last but not least, we would love to know what you think. I'm going to share a link for our program feedback form in the chat, and please feel free to fill that out as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Oh my goodness.